Good morning or afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to this edition of CRIN's Digital C3, Connecting, Collaborating, and Conversation, where we gather to explore the ideas, technologies, challenges shaping Canada's clean resource future. My name is Nanette Ho-Covington. I'm the newly anointed or appointed Executive Director of the ETC Foundation, which runs the Energy Transition Centre. So I want to credit my colleagues over at Spartan Controls that helped formulate today's topic around cybersecurity. So today, as we're zeroing in on a theme that's increasingly vital to our sector's resilience and competitiveness, cybersecurity, as our industries become more digitally integrated, from smart infrastructure and automation to data-driven operations, the threats we face are evolving just as fast as the innovations we embrace. So cybersecurity is no longer a technical footnote. It is a strategic pillar and increasingly a regulatory priority. That brings us to a critical development in the national stage, Canada's Bill C-26, which aims to bolster cybersecurity protections across federally regulated critical infrastructure sectors, including energy, telecom, and transport. The implications for industry are significant, and navigating this evolving landscape requires clarity, collaboration, and leadership. Another piece to this that Jeffrey just shared with me earlier is that the AER has new regulations that they'll be imposing at the end of May, so we need to be aware of those as well. So with that in mind, I am thrilled, and we are thrilled, to welcome a key voice in today's conversation, Jeffrey Brown. Jeffrey is the OT practice lead for Fortinet for Western Canada. And he brings us a wealth of experience in helping industrial and critical infrastructure organizations understand and defend against cyber threats. At Fortinet, he leads efforts to bridge the gap between the traditional IT security and the specialized complex needs of operational technology environments, exactly where clean resource innovation often lives. His insights will help us unpack what Bill C-26 and what the AER is about to bring to the table means in practice, how industry can proactively adapt, and where collaboration across private, public innovation and innovation networks play a decisive role in building secure and sustainable systems. Thank you for all of you for being with us today, those online and in person, where you're joining from industry, whether you're joining from industry, government, academia, or the innovation ecosystem. I've had too much coffee this morning, as you can tell. Today's discussion is a chance to connect, collaborate, and advance a national conversation on cybersecurity and Canada's clean energy future. So, Jeffrey, let's get started. Let's turn on your mic first.
Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you for the warm welcome. That was absolutely wonderful.
You're welcome. Oh, one more thing. For the audience, folks, if you have questions along the way, please let us know and we'll run a mic to you. And the reason we run the mic to you is that you won't be heard online unless we do. Okay, cool.
Awesome, thank you. I really appreciate being here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. Because I am an OT person, my background actually is electrical engineering and process automation. About a decade ago, the company I was working for asked that some of us get network trained, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I was the only one to pass all the network exams. So by default, I became that network person. And since that time, I have been, I will say, fighting to have better and more secure networks within the OT environment. Eventually I made my way to Fortinet, which is a pure play cybersecurity company. And in that time, in many ways, it kind of feels like I've been banging my head against the wall, but in the last, I'm going to say, kind of year to 18 months, I think there's been some real big movement in OT security and the fact that it is becoming that much more important. But just understand that we really are in the infancy of OT cybersecurity. I will say this, what is old is new again. Things that have disappeared, if you will, on the IT side are very prevalent on the OT side, things like legacy OSs. On top of this, we do have the unique proprietary networks that you'll see on the IT side, and we'll delve into that a little bit more.
Jeffrey, I'm the acronym police too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
COS?
COS?
Didn't you mention COS? What?
No.
No.
legacy
Oh,
operating
LOS.
systems.
Okay, okay, okay.
OS. Appreciate that. So organizations are under attack. As the big topic that everybody loves to talk about is AI. And if anybody was at B-Sides recently or has seen some of the other things like S4 or other conferences, AI has become a topic of attack and how it is, for lack of a better term, dumbing down the ability to attack OT. OT does, in general, take some specialized knowledge. You have to understand different protocols, kind of where they come from. Things like Modbus, as an example. If you don't know what they are, you don't understand how they work, it becomes a little harder to attack, and OT in general has kind of lived on that obscurity scale. Unfortunately, we've got attackers that have really come after OT. They're realizing that OT or operational technology is very much a viable target. And if you do interrupt operations, it's far worse than just a ransom attack that you're going to see on the IT side. While it's devastating on the IT side, on the OT side, it could be far, far worse. It could be an environmental release. It could be loss of equipment, but it also could be the loss of life, which is very, very important. So risk and safety are very large topics on the OT side. And obviously with the weaponization of things like AI and people basically being able to go to ChatGPT and say, hey, how do I attack a Schneider Modicon PLC with Modbus? It will actually write you a script. And then you can, as everybody knows with ChatGPT, you can make it iterative. And then you can get it down and you can test it and work with it. And I hate to say this, there are a ton of OT devices sitting wide open on the internet. And if you use things like, brain work with me, there are websites where you can actually scrape the internet and look for IP addresses, and they actually separate them out actually into industrial control systems. So there are these websites that will do this for you. You use ChatGPT. Now all of a sudden you're getting an attack built for you, and you don't really need to know a whole heck of a lot about operational technology or industrial control systems or anything like that. So this is kind of where how things become scary. And unfortunately, Canada is a little behind. So here's a great stat from Gartner that by 2025, 75% of OT security solutions will be delivered via multifunctional platforms. So, and this is the big one, is there's still very much an IT-OT divide. I will use this as an example. I was speaking to a customer not too long ago, and they were making some major changes on their infrastructure. And I'm like, hey, I don't see anybody on IT on this call. Are you gonna have to run this past them? And the response to me was, do you see them on this call? So there is still very much an IT-OT divide, but if we're really going to protect these systems, we need to start to come to work together. Really how I view it, and this is me, 20 plus years in the OT industry, is that we need to stand on the shoulders of giants. IT has been there, they've done that, they've already implemented the technology. We just need to get that institutionalized knowledge from the OT side and now apply it from the IT. So stand on the shoulders of giants. It's really important that we do that. And we're already saying that, that Gartner's predicting that, OT attacks are going to be weaponized. Well, we're already starting to see this. So things like Volt Typhoon, and we've got advanced persistent threats from the likes of China, from the likes of Iran, from the likes of a lot of countries that are going after the US. Volt Typhoon, as an example, lived 300 days within medium-sized utilities in the US. And they didn't, and this is the part of the problem with OT, is that we don't have a lot of mechanisms to protect. So in general, one of my favorite stats is that 95% of OT systems are a black box to IT. And in general, what we've done in the past is we've put a firewall on the edge, wiped our hands and said, we're good to go. When in reality, we still have no idea what the data flows are, what's actually connected in that, what's changing, who's talking to what, even to the point where we're not even sure about information that is coming and going from those sites. So absolutely scary is what is happening. And there has been massive spikes within, just in Canada alone. we'll click here. Here's just a couple examples of companies that have been attacked within the last couple of years. And a lot of times you'll see there's really no discrimination when it comes to the types of attacks that we're seeing. It could be a hospital, so IoMT, Internet of Medical Things. It could be Hydro-Quebec as an example. You're looking at utilities, we're looking at cities. And when cities are getting attacked, like I'll use the city of Hamilton as an example, we're losing 911. That's a major one. Or we're losing things like traffic management systems. So now your lights are affected within your municipality. But oil and gas isn't just alone on this one. So there are definitely oil and gas. I've kind of left them out because I don't want to pick on anybody. But oil and gas is in the same boat as everybody else. And I'm currently working with and have worked with a bunch of oil and gas companies, and they are doing better and they're expanding past those edge protection devices and taking on more of a holistic approach. So we're here to talk about Bill C-26. So why is Bill C-26 so important? Well, part of the reason is we've tried the carrot. We've tried to entice people. We've tried to entice companies and critical infrastructure to put in security and make these things important. But guess what happens? Carrots don't always work. So unfortunately, when it comes to legislation, that's the stick. We're now forcing you to put in security measures. So here's where the current standing of where it is. This is directly off the federal website. It has completed third reading. Unfortunately, what has happened is they found some wording that would have actually negated a lot of Bill C-26, so it's actually coming back down to the House of Commons, and it will move up again. It'll be back in the House of Commons when our lovely federal parliament decides to sit down again. With the current government, because it is the same as the last one, it will be coming back up. This is probably my favorite piece of legislation, is Bill C-26. Obviously, it's cybersecurity. That is near and dear to my heart, obviously because I'm in the cybersecurity industry. But it also has a sister bill, if you will, which is Bill C-27. And that is very, very similar to GDPR in Europe. So between these two bills, you're going to see a lot of changes happening. And again, just don't be too scared. This is just the first stage of it. Once it gets passed, once it goes through royal assent, this is just the first stage. You're going to have some time to get your cybersecurity plans and programs in place. I would definitely say, though, if you don't have one now, I would start.
So the delay has helped industry right now then?
100%. And I will say this, I mean, obviously I am from Western Canada. It has helped, but at the same time understand, because of oil and gas in the industries that we have here, I actually believe that our federal government is going to be using Western Canada as the whipping stick, and they're going to try to find somebody that doesn't have a good plan in place. And so I would heavily recommend that we get a plan in place now, because I don't want a company in Western Canada, I don't want a book thrown at them and them being used as an example.
All right, so carrots and sticks. So based on the sticks piece, with Bill C-26 placing legal liability on executives and directors, how should leadership teams adapt their cybersecurity strategies to ensure compliance and protection?
Well, if we had some people in the audience, my big question to them, when we talk about legal liability on executives and directors, is how many of them actually have cyber insurance, personal cyber insurance?
You need to have personal cyber insurance?
They're going to need personal cyber insurance because of the legal liability now falls in executives and directors of the government. So this is going to be part of it, is when companies go for their cyber insurance, they're either going to have a clause, or they're going to have their own personal cyber insurance in case of, due to Bill C-26.
And then there's also compliancy pieces too, that's
100%.
a bit more onerous than they've done in the past, right? There's a lot more reporting requirements?
Yes, there's some more reporting requirements. So one of the things I want to...
Jumping ahead? Sorry.
You're skipping ahead on me.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's okay.
You're
just excited.
Well, the part of it is just being curious, right?
So I mean, here's kind of like the due diligence available and and all of that fun stuff. But really what I wanted to get on is, when we were talking about executives, was that it's up to $1 million in the case of an individual, so director, C-suite, that level, as well as is up to $15 million in any other case, which is the company. Well, no, it would be complete. Yeah. Sorry. Say again.
Is cyber part of D&O insurance or is it separate?
It is completely separate. Cyber insurance is a category all unto itself.
Thank you.
And so not only is there now financial penalties, so there's what I will call skin in the game for executives, because in the past, that's not so much the case. The company will take the brunt of that. Now you're putting personal liability on individuals. And the other interesting piece is the continuing violation. So a violation that is committed or continued on more than one day constitutes a separate violation. So depending on the severity of the breach, this could be up to $1 million per day for that said individual. That is big dollar value for an individual person.
Per day?
Per day.
That's hefty insurance you need to carry.
Yeah, and individuals may include any director or officer of the designated operator. So that is some big skin in the game for these people. So CISOs are already, so Chief Information Security Officers are already stressed. This is going to make sure that they do have a plan in place. Because right now, a lot of them don't have a proper OT security program in place.
So are there examples in industry where someone has already started looking at this and ahead of the game, Jeffrey?
Yes and no. I would say a lot of even major oil and gas companies are literally just on the beginning of their journey with regards to OT security. I do know a bunch of companies, as I said before, that have edge devices. So they have an edge firewall, but that's all they've got. However, we're starting to see things more like software-defined wide area network access, SASE, so secure access service edge. As an example, we're starting to see more and more of these other secure technologies where you're starting to encrypt all of your data to back and forth from headquarters to the site or site to site, that type of thing, as well as other technologies like endpoint protection.
So we have large corporations downtown, and we also have small. So how scared should we be?
It's not. I hate peddling and fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Unfortunately, it's not if it's going to happen. It's when is it going to happen. How I preface this is: when you drive a car, would you drive a car without a seatbelt and airbags?
No.
Exactly. So cybersecurity is in that same vein. It is a safety and risk mitigation tool.
I have a question as well on this topic. So administrative penalties, is this only for the OT cybersecurity or it's OT IT cybersecurity?
It is OT and IT.
Okay, thank you.
I just happen to be from the other side of the fence. So where basically this is all going to be mandated out of is from the CCCS, so the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. So when we're talking about who we're going to actually report to, it'll actually be the CCCS. And so they are out of Ottawa, and they're a federally regulated group, if you will. And they're the ones that are going to be doing the audits and the checking in and who you're going to report to in the case of a breach.
By posting a picture of their building, have we posed a new security threat?
No. So this was actually brought in back in 2022, and there are two parts to it. So there's part one, which is an amendment to the Telecommunications Act, and part two is the creation of the Critical Cybersecurity Systems Protection Act. Truth be told, part one isn't going to affect most of us too much. It affects more of the Teluses, the Rogers, the Bells, that type of thing. But the CCSPA is going to be the one that affects all of us the most. So here are the industries in which it affects. Really, the ones that I think more often than not is going to be the transportation, power and pipelines is going to be the one that probably affects us the most in Western Canada or wherever you're watching. And transportation is going to be an interesting one. So the reason I say transportation is going to be interesting, and the reason I say this is because it is both air, rail, road, and sea. And so I think there's going to be some transportation companies that are going to be shocked a little bit. And what I mean by this is the likes of, say, Bison Transport, or trucking companies that do interprovincial shipping, that type of thing. The ones like air and rail and pipelines, everybody kind of looks at that and goes, yeah, that makes sense, because it does. And so, you know, anytime you're doing anything which would be federally mandated or interprovincial is going to be the industries or the companies that get affected by this.
Even cross-border?
Cross-border into the US included. Yeah.
And so then if it's cross-border, how do you know which jurisdiction
Well, here's the unfortunate part. You're going to have to comply with both. So, so the example I'm thinking what you're using would be a pipeline that goes into the US.
exactly?
So yeah, so you'd actually have to comply with both Bill C-26 and the CCSPA as well as TSA-2.
And so in the US, there's only one, or does each state have their own set of
Nope,
regulations?
it's federally, it's
federal.
TSA-2, as well as if you're doing utilities, it will be NERC-CIP.
Okay, so you mentioned, earlier we talked about AER having something by the end of May. Is that later in the presentation?
That is later in the presentation.
Okay.
We're not quite
jumping
there
ahead.
yet.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just, you know.
That's okay. I'm just going to touch on it lightly. It's actually a pretty simple regulation. How are we doing for time? We're doing good?
No, we're doing great. Someone's just trying to ping me on LinkedIn, that's all.
So what you might find interesting on this one is the fact that you don't see water, wastewater, you don't see healthcare. The reason for that is because those are provincially mandated. And the interesting thing is, I think they will come.
Yeah, it better come.
Because I don't know about you, but while it's really nice to have my oil and gas, if I run out of water, that's kind of important to me. I think that would be
Or someone
catastrophic.
Yeah, or someone accessing life support systems, right?
100%. So we're not reinventing the wheel with Bill C-26. There's a lot of different frameworks already out there. So NIST would be one, ISO 27001 from the IT side, really, really common. The one I like to reference the most is IEC 62443, or ISA 99. That one's pretty much from an OT perspective is kind of considered the golden standard. And so that one is probably the best framework. It is the most comprehensive, if you will, and covers more frameworks and more legislation than probably any of the others do. So there's some NIST 2. So Europe is, I hate to say this, they're probably a decade ahead of us with regards to regulation. They're already on NIST 2 or NIS 2. Where we're in Canada just getting our first legislation piece in place probably this year. So it's kind of scary that they're so far in advance, but at the same time, if you're looking for where legislation is going to go, they're a great example of where to look, especially since the EU is a large conglomeration of countries, you know, Germany and France and Belgium, and so all of them had to get together to come up with a common framework for all of them to follow. So again, if you're looking for kind of a base, a framework, start with IEC 62443 and possibly look at legislation like NIS 2 as a place to start and how to plan out a cybersecurity program.
Do you have that links to those available on your Fortinet site, or how do they find all that
So
information?
you can just, NIS 2 is
Yep, it's
easy
international.
Google search,
Yep.
and it's publicly available.
Okay,
So none of these, so like NIS or TSA2 or any of these other legislations, none of them are behind paywalls or anything like that. They're publicly available, so you can read and see, you know, they are a governance piece. So you make sure when you're looking at them, there is shall and there's must in the wording. If it's a must, that means you have to do it. Shall means in the next iteration, it probably will be a must.
Okay, so it's a guideline.
It's a guideline. So here's the legislation that is a little closer to home. So this goes into effect on May 31st. And what this is asking is for facilities, specifically not even companies, facilities that the Alberta Energy Regulator deems as critical. You will currently, where it's going to be at and where it's at on May 31st is you're just getting a letter saying, hey, you have been deemed as critical infrastructure, and you will now need to prove to us that you have a cybersecurity program in place. And it is based off of the, hopefully I get this right, CSA Z246.1 standard, 2021. And so the giggle I have about this is, while this has come out, again, you can look this up, you can find it real quick. That CSA standard is from 2021, and as of July of this year, the 2025 standard is coming out. And that one is more robust than the 2021 standard, or framework, I should say. That CSA standard that I mentioned, that Z246.1, it is currently being used by the Canada Energy Regulator and also the BC Energy Regulator. So it is a common framework that everybody basically across Canada is going to be using. So this shouldn't come as a shock to anybody that is using it. I'm just proud of the fact that Alberta, Canada-wide, is the first province to put legislation like this in place. So again, don't be scared of this one just yet. This is literally, they're just sending letters out. You've probably, I'm going to say, probably have got a year to 18 months before we really need to get a solid program in place. This is currently just giving letters out to the individual sites and facilities saying, hey, we have deemed you as critical infrastructure. You need to start putting something in place.
But to put together a plan, though, oh, I shouldn't stand over to the side. Put together a plan, though, Jeffrey, it takes time to develop a strategy, right?
100%.
So I know it's a year or 18 months away, but how long does it normally take for you to build out your strategy and your plan and then implementation? So by the time you do all those things, you have to do it. Like
100%. So yeah, I think year is actually not a bad time. Truth be told, again, you're not having to reinvent the wheel. You're not having to start a cybersecurity program from scratch. There are things like NIST CSF, there's IEC 62443, and others that help you with almost a step-by-step program that you can implement in place. I understand they're going to be broad and general. They have to be. They can't be industry specific. However, they'll give you the broad strokes that you need to get a program in place.
A lot of this is very, very new to a lot of people, right? And so you know, who do they reach out to? Do they reach out to you first? Do they reach out to somebody like Spartan Controls that manages all the data for these companies on the operational side? Like, where's the right starting point?
There's a Spartan would be actually a fantastic resource, especially on the operational technology side. More so because they actually understand the OT sphere and understand the risk and safety required for a cybersecurity program. Obviously, you can reach out to the vendors, not only Fortinet, but the others as well. We're all very well versed in cybersecurity. I'm not going to bash my competition. We all make fantastic product. A lot of times it comes down to preference and what you're comfortable using. But we do have industry leaders. All of us have been in the industry for many, many years. Now it's just finding somebody that you're comfortable with and that you want to work
and you
with.
trust, right?
Exactly.
Trust. Not
Trust
just
is
comfort,
huge.
it's trust is huge. Okay, cool. I don't mean to keep interrupting your presentation.
By all means,
but I
go
just
for
thought,
it.
You know, it's more fun as a conversation. And I don't know anything, so this is a lot.
So the reason for this slide, can't step too far. First slide is this is just kind of to show you all the different automation vendors, and all of them have what I will call their own flavor of cybersecurity. The interesting thing is I've never been to a facility where it was only ever one vendor. And so when we're creating a cybersecurity program, especially on the operational technology side, we have to understand that what works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other, and that we need to come up with an overarching holistic program. I've worked heavily with Rockwell Automation. They do have some neat things on the cybersecurity, but I've never been where you didn't have a Honeywell or an Emerson or something else sitting at that facility. And so what we need to do is kind of remove ourselves up another level. So when we're creating that program, that we don't necessarily take proprietary communication or technology along with us. We have to integrate it, yes, and use that institutionalized knowledge and how to work with it, but we need to have a program that encompasses everything. So, when we talk about, I've said ISA and then 62443, when we're talking about governance, so GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, and the industrial control system programs are going to be a little different, and it really depends, as I mentioned, on the prior slide, what the automation vendor that you have. So it will change a little bit. But you're going to have site-to-site policies. You're going to have different practices and procedures at each and every individual site, because every single one is basically different. And I hate to say that. And this is, I think, why AER went to site by site versus by a company, because depending on each facility, you might have a different program in place.
Wow. So you're saying there's an if-and kind of decision tree
100%.
that has to happen here for each company?
For each company, for each site. So I will use an example. A saddle facility will have a completely different cybersecurity program than a refinery. They will have similarities. I'm not saying they won't. However, each individual site will have its proclivities and its needs. So, you got your industry and government standards, you got your IEC. This is where you can actually get your program, and then basically you can base that off your facility, base that off of your projects. And one of the things I like to talk about is cyber-informed engineering. And what we need to start doing is making sure that cybersecurity is part of your greenfield or major upgrade projects. It shouldn't be an afterthought, because this is what happens a lot of times. It is an afterthought. And in general, if you want to talk about cost, the cost is probably going to be triple or quadruple if you make it an afterthought versus if you integrate it into your existing engineering or even PLC programming or industrial control system programming. So something like the PLC Top 20 programming code. There's actually a website that was put together by some very bright individuals that gives you how to do some PLC coding that is cyber secure and cyber aware.
So speaking of afterthought, here's one. I forgot to tell the folks online that if you have any questions, you feel free to ask them online. We have it enter it in the Q&A or the chat. We'll catch both of them. And right now, I think we have no questions online, but please submit them.
So eventually what we want to do, and when we're talking about that IT-OT convergence, is getting that 27001, the ISO 27001, the IEC 62443, and we're starting to blend them together, especially when we talk about facility operations, because I have yet to ever be at a facility where there wasn't IT and OT at the same time. And what we have done in the past, and I hate to say this, is, and I apologize to any OT people on the line, we are a lazy group of people. We will press the easy button as much as we can. And at the same time, if we don't get OT people on board, they will actively, especially operators, will actively try to bypass those security measures. So this is where we need to all work together in that IT-OT convergence. Again, stand on the shoulders of giants, find out what they have done in the past, and now apply them to an OT framework or an OT situation, project, that type of thing. So I've talked a lot about IEC 62443. Here's kind of the top, I think it's 7 or 8, zones and conduits. So what zones and conduits are is a zone is an area of common functions. So in a gas plant, that would be like an EG train or an inlet or a piece of equipment. Conduits are how zones talk to each other back and forth, what data transmits back and forth. You might have just heard this called segmentation. Easy one. IEC uses zones and conduits as the terminology for basically segmentation. You're probably laughing at me if you're from the IT side going, of course, segmentation. You would be surprised how many facilities I go to that are absolutely flat networks where there is no segmentation. Secure remote connectivity. So this became a big one during COVID when skeleton crews were about and people were being sent home and we needed remote access. Unfortunately, it was a little ad hoc and we didn't take security in mind with that remote access. And the younger generations don't want to go to site anymore. They don't want to go steel-toed boots and hard hats and basically what I did for the first 10, 12 years of my career, they don't want to do that. They want to do everything from home or from an office. Unfortunately,
Just have a question online whenever you're finished with, you shoot it? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So, so do we know to some extent what the bill's requirements will be? For example, the organization must have an incident response plan, the organization should have a change management process, et cetera. And I don't understand this next sentence, but it essentially says if NIST CSF Bill, if an org uses NIST CSF to build their program, something might be missed by the time the bill is ratified.
Yeah, so no, there's no specific legislation that states you need an OXOC, that type of thing. They're saying you need to put a cybersecurity program in place, and how you do it is up to you.
Okay.
Eventually, again, you have to remember this is the first iteration of the bill. It will be very generic. So if you've looked at NIS or TSA as kind of primers, they were very generic to begin with. And as they go down that iterative process, TSA2 or NIS2, they become much more prescriptive. At the same time, you have to understand that now have a greater timeline in place, say NIS to NIS2. As an example, you're looking at however many years, it was 7 years to a decade from when those first 2 iterations came out. So by that time, your cybersecurity maturity should be much higher than where you were initially.
Hopefully that answers your question online.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So the answer is no, there's nothing super specific. Here's a big one, when we go back to this IEC 62443 is deep OT visibility. As I mentioned, OT is a big black box for the most part. If you don't know what you have, you can't protect it. And when I used to do network assessments on the industrial side, invariably I would find equipment, gear, networking gear, cellular modems, that type of thing, that the operators or the site had no idea about. And it was put on by an OEM or a third-party contractor or what have you. It happens all of the time, and it's not their fault. But this is where having a good cybersecurity program in place can help you out. So if somebody does plug in a cellular modem or a device, you will know about it. Role-based access control. This is a big one. How many people, I can't see online, but still have a sticky note on a monitor with your username and password?
I don't.
We've gotten advanced. We've stuck it underneath the keyboard now, right? You think I'm kidding, but not too long ago there was an analyst on CNN that was talking, and he actually had his passwords over his shoulder on his bookcase. Oh yeah. So I mean, we laugh about this and we giggle, but unfortunately, it's still very true that it still happens. Endpoint security, I mentioned that before, EPP, endpoint protection. I still see it in a lot of older OT environments. They're still using just standard antivirus with signatures. And guess what? It hasn't been updated in 15 years. And even during turnarounds or anything like that, they still haven't done anything. So really, is that effective at all? No. And this is where, we need to get into things like endpoint detection and response, where, sorry, I'm going to have to collect my paycheck. I have to say AI and ML, where you're actually looking at user behaviors and you can control things like USB sticks and you can't plug them in. And, Johnny, the operator, is trying to transfer, 6 gigs of CAD drawings to a random USB stick. Whoa, that might be suspicious. Yeah, and that's where the big difference is from an endpoint protection point of view versus, the kind of the traditional antivirus. So it's really important. And then on top of this is, starting to talk about NOC and SOC. And then I understand that a lot of OT environments aren't mature enough to do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't do that as a service, as an example. NOC or SOC as a service is a big one. And then advanced persistent threats. So, people are like, oh, what do you mean by advanced persistent threats? Well, sandboxing, right? So what a sandbox is that you can download a firmware from a vendor, but you're not sure if it's a legit firmware or a new software piece, and you can actually put that into that sandbox, open it up, see what it actually does. If it actually does what it's supposed to do, good. If it does something malicious, you can pull that away. Or something like deception technology. And you're starting to put in, instead of having 4 PLCs on site, you can make it look like you've got 20. And now the attacker has to be correct 100% of the time, not just the defender. So it makes your life a lot easier, because as soon as someone touches that deception device, now you know somebody's in your network. And in fact, where I've actually deployed these the most is actually in the most secure zones of an industrial control system. And people are wondering, well, why there? Because if that is the most important piece, if that's your crown jewel of your facility, you want to know if somebody is in there, whether internally or externally. And sometimes if it is internal and someone's just messing around, they're doing an Nmap scan or an angry IP scan, and they're not supposed to be doing what they're doing, well, at the very least, you can have that chat with them. So it gives you that information that you need. And so I'm just going to simplify this. I know I don't have a ton of time left over. Here's my 5-step guide to the top 2 that you saw on the IEC 62443. Really the most kind of simple ones, but what's going to happen here in these next 2 slides, and the next one's about secure remote access, is I'm actually going to touch on everything else that was in that IEC 62443. So first one, and I've talked about this a little bit, build an IT/OT team. Again, stand on the shoulders of giants. As I've said, there has been arguments between IT and OT. OT people need to stop thinking they're so special. Almost everything is now a TCP IP packet of some sort. And this is where you can do things like deep packet inspection and all of these other things. We can do that. At the same time, IT needs to understand the fact that you're running 24/7. You can't shut down. That, this is where IT sometimes doesn't understand. If you want me to break it down, IT serves the business, OT is the business. So if OT isn't running, then the company isn't making money. So that's where IT needs to understand that, but OT can't be so resistant to change, saying you're going to make my life difficult, that they actually impede putting a program in place. Map your network. I already talked about that deep OT visibility. Find everything. What are all your traffic flows? What is talking to what? What do you actually have? Because if you don't know what's on there, you can't segment. You can't protect it. Then from that network map, you're going to design your segmentation plan. Again, this is where IT and OT need to really talk to each other. Because IT already knows how to do this. They've done a really good job of this for the past 15, 20 years. OT just needs to give you that local knowledge, that institutionalized knowledge of, hey, this operator's been here for 30 years. He knows exactly how that aiming train works. Cool, talk to him, work with him or them. But once you have it designed, this is really the important part. This is where really, the rubber meets the road. I hate that euphemism, but it works. This is where you actually deploy it. Make sure that you actually follow what you've designed. Don't go ad hoc. Don't start trying to make changes. Things like firewalls are very important and have to be set up very specifically. At the same time, as you are deploying this plan, make sure that you have the ability to roll back. Because I have yet to ever commission a site where something hasn't gone wrong and you've had to do a little bit of a rollback and pause and possibly, do a kind of a redesign or something on the fly. So again, making sure that you have that ability. Then enhance, maintain, and train. So understand that cybersecurity is not a one and done. It's a journey and an iterative process in which you're going to continue to try to upgrade and maintain, because things will change within your network. You're going to add things. You're going to change things. So one of the big ones when we talk about governance, risk, and compliance is documentation. Documentation is king. And this includes even all the way down to things like your switching and what is connected to where. Because I don't know the amount of times I've gone to a facility. It's like, oh, okay, this is port 6 on the switch on the far side of the plant. You go to there and you're like, oh, that's not labeled correctly. I have no idea where this actually goes. And so that becomes a real issue if you're trying to troubleshoot and you're trying to, you do have a maintenance issue. And then train. You have to train OT people specifically for OT things. What would normally you would see on an IT side, it just won't work. So again, we need to make things very, very specific. And you're going to see a couple of the same things happen again, if you will, when it comes to secure remote access. Because guess what? As I mentioned earlier, secure remote access is super common now. It hasn't been done very well in the past. There's a large printing company that I was dealing with out of Manitoba. They do things for things like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Actually, they printed backdrops. So that should kind of give you the idea of how big of a print shop they are. And their OEMs they had for these multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment wanted remote access to their machines for obvious reasons, for ink levels, for maintenance, et cetera, except they had 8 different remote access solutions of which they had no control over. So they had RDP and TeamViewer and VNC and you name it. They had a mishmash of everything. And my question to them was, well, how do you stop someone from pivoting from one machine to the next machine? They're like, oh, we've got VLANs. Oh, okay, that's not a security measure. So they really didn't have an answer for it, where, when we talk about secure remote access, it's much more than just one piece of technology. Much like segmentation, it's more of a wholesale plan. So one of them is implement zero trust. So if you don't know what zero trust is, it's never trust, always verify. And this can't be even more true for the likes of third-party contractors. And what I mean by this is, because we use them heavily in the oil and gas industry, is the fact that if someone brings a third-party laptop in, you don't know what other networks that laptop has been connected to, and you don't know the cyber hygiene of that laptop. And this is internal or external to your network. So my past, I used to work for an engineering company, used to do process automation. I'd walk onto a site, plug my laptop into a switch, and just start programming. This is, a number of years ago before cybersecurity became even a thing. And at that time, I could have been at 5, 6 other sites in that week. Well, you don't know if you've got a virus, if there's a USB stick that they pulled from somewhere else that had some malware. Now you've pressed it to another facility. And I remember working with one facility that did have malware, and it took them 6 months to get rid of it, because every time they thought they got rid of it, it lingered on one machine and then reinfected the whole network all over again. So zero trust is absolutely huge, making sure that you understand the cyber hygiene of everybody that's there. Update your remote access tools. As I mentioned, let's get away from unsecure things like RDP or VNC or TeamViewer and start implementing technology that is encrypted, has usernames and passwords, that rotates passwords, has things like over-the-shoulder monitoring. So you can actually video what somebody's doing. And I actually have a customer that implemented technology that my company has. And what they were using it for was over-the-shoulder watching, because they had a contractor that was claiming, 4 hours to implement some programming. And in reality, they only took 20 minutes. So there's some other things you can do with, a little bit of Big Brother. Continuous monitoring and network visibility. This one is huge. You want to know when somebody's plugging a new device in, or if a PLC is mysteriously talking way more than it should, or a large amount of data is trying to be exfiltrated out through your firewall, but from a known source. You want all of those network visibility, tools and technologies. And this is where you're doing things like deep packet inspection or intrusion protection, that type of thing. And you're actually taking, Modbus TCP, or you're taking Ethernet industrial protocol from Rockwell. You're taking that and you're actually stripping it apart, and you're actually doing the deep packet inspection on that to make sure that it actually is what it actually says it is. And this is where I come back to the GRC again, the governance, risk, and compliance. Documentation. So make sure that you have got strong policies and procedures in place. So in the event of something like a breach, everybody knows what their role actually is, and panic doesn't set in. So you're making sure all of these policies and procedures in place. Make sure the OT people know what they're actually supposed to do, as opposed to burying their head in the sand. Making sure IT understands that they're part of that incident response. And last but not least is, again, awareness and training. It is absolutely huge on the OT side of things. Again, if OT people, if you don't get them on board, then they'll actively try to go around those security measures. So bring them on board, bring them in, have that IT-OT convergence, have that IT-OT conversation often. And then that way, everything will have a smooth transition, especially with regards to remote access, because it's more than likely going to be the IT group that implements it.
That's it?
That's it. I'm sorry, that's it. But I figured, for the last little bit, I'd give kind of 2 5-step plans for, to start that cybersecurity journey.
Yes.
With the people that are online and here.
Well, how do they get a hold of you, Jeff, if they have more questions?
So right at the bottom, if you can see, is the ot.canada@fortinet.com. And this is a mailbox that actually gets all of us across Canada wide, because there's a group of us.
Great.
So I cover Western Canada, and I have a colleague that covers Ontario and Eastern Canada, as well as I have.
Is Ontario not part of Eastern Canada?
No, it's
I
considered,
know, it thinks
it's
the
central.
Central. Okay. Well, I do have a few questions for you, because the key thing today is around education. So for those of you that are joined us today, thank you very much. We'll continue having the conversation. In about 5 minutes, we'll close off the online version and continue visiting in person. But for those of you online or those of you in person who want to revisit this again, this is all being recorded. And so it'll be on the CRIN YouTube channel afterwards. So you can re-watch this all and re-experience Jeff. Right? So Jeff, I want to, again, from a learning perspective, I had a few prepared questions for us to go through, and I asked them throughout. But there's a couple I wanted to ask that I didn't get a chance to ask. And one of them is around sector vulnerabilities. And I think we talked about it earlier when you showed that the transportation sector is probably the one most unexpected. But what is most at risk with the energy and transportation sector, and what proactive measures should people take?
Okay, so at the very least, and this is going to sound, I think, overly simplistic, start a journey now. Start with anything.
Start with calling Jeff, is what you're saying?
Sure. I mean, I won't say no. From a cybersecurity journey, a little bit of something is better than nothing. So if you don't have an edge firewall, put an edge firewall in place. Start with segmentation, start with secure remote access, start somewhere. Just anything is better than nothing. And, my joke usually with OT security and just the OT industry is we joke about, things are hard on the outside, soft on the inside. Unfortunately for the OT industry right now, we're soft on the outside and soft on the inside.
Okay, so the first step actually is probably go get insurance. And then
Here's the problem though, unless you have a cybersecurity, and I've dealt with this in the mining industry already, they couldn't get cyber insurance because they didn't have an OT security plan in place.
oh, so you actually have to have a plan in place and prove it with the insurance company before
Correct.
you can actually get insurance.
Yes.
Okay, so that is the first step. Okay, so then from, you and I are in the supply chain world, right? And you got
Yes.
vendors as well. And so how does Bill C-26 impact third-party cybersecurity contracts? And what are the best practices that an organization should take to follow their security plans with supply chain?
So depending on the manufacturer, there actually is, again, I come back to IEC 62443, there are other ones. You actually can get certifications, third-party certifications saying that from a third-party supply, third-party contractor, be it from engineering and programming, that you were certified to be cyber secure.
Okay, so in my role prior to joining the ETC Foundation, I looked after sustainability at Spartan Controls. And so we got questionnaires all the time. And part of the questionnaires is what level of cybersecurity do you have in place? How do I know that the data I provide you to be able to do the things we need to do together is going to be properly protected? So they're trying to understand our processes and procedures. So what else should we do? What other things should we do?
That's part of your GRC. That's part of your documentation. And again, I say it all the time, but it's document, document, document.
Okay, and then lots of companies want to audit what it is that you do too, right? So,
100%.
okay, so how do you know, who do they connect with to understand, to make sure that they've actually done the right things and that it is something that will pass the sniff test?
That's a little bit of a loaded question.
Well, yeah, I like loaded questions, don't you?
One is being able to prove, and again, this is why you would deal with a framework of your choice, be it ISO 27001,
Okay.
NIST CSF, and IEC 62443. And then what you can do is show how you measure against one of these frameworks. Again, because you can create a cybersecurity plan on your own, but to do so would be extremely difficult. And I heavily recommend that, working with an existing framework, because that way it actually will give you almost step-by-step guide to setting up a cybersecurity program in place. And then from there, you can document all of that.
Okay, cool. Any questions on?
We do have a question online.
Perfect.
Does Bill C-26 have anything for increased penalties for cyber criminals?
Ooh.
It does not. Unfortunately, I would absolutely love
So
more penalties, but
it penalizes the executives, but doesn't penalize the offender?
so it penalizes the executives in the case of a cyber incident in which they have been shown to be willfully ignorant,
Right.
if you will.
Because the new regulation will require them to report every cyber incident.
Correct. And this is where I think some of the legislation might change here in the future, is because right now it's kind of like the SEC out of the US, that you have to report immediately. And so there's some ambiguity around what immediately means, and you wouldn't think it would. But if immediately is, well, I didn't find out, it's been in my system for 100 days, but I just found out about it, is that immediately? Or, there's some,
Right.
again, this is why it's being pushed back down to the House of Commons, because some of it's going to be reworded to be a little more
Pragmatic, to be honest.
pragmatic and I think specific.
Yeah, okay, cool. And then there's global regulations as well that is, there's some, as you said, we're 10 years ahead, like Europe. Are there parallels between what we're doing here in Canada versus
There will be.
other
Yeah,
jurisdictions?
100%. So, Canada is part of Five Eyes, which is the UK, EU, New Zealand, US. We are the last nation in which to put cybersecurity regulation in place. If we don't put something in soon, we're actually going to fall behind.
Right.
And so what we need to do is look at our Five Eyes companions and take the best of the best and integrate it into what we are doing, and with Bill C-26.
And it needs to be compatible, because we have lots of corporations that are cross-border, right, or international.
100%.
So it needs to make it simple for everybody to deploy and
Yes.
implement. Okay, great. Well, that takes us to the hour. Any other questions? Nothing else. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Nan. I'm going to be around for the next half hour, and this is Jeffrey, or Jeff, for the OT guru of Western Canada for Fortinet. And thank you very much. We'll catch you at the next one. So the next current event is around generative AI, and it's on June 18th. So hopefully we'll see you there. And again, if you can't make it, that's all right. You can watch it again on YouTube. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.